current events transpiring across the Atlantic, hoping for destruction on both sides of the US conflict. One article opined on the expected duration of the conflict raging there. The Americans had recently engaged in hostilities after years of southern states bickering with those in the north. Since last month's first firing of shots at Fort Sumter, South Carolina, much taunting and posturing had occurred. How the citizens of the United States enjoyed fighting. Each side boasted the skirmish would last just a few months, and self-proclaimed experts declared that all the blood to be spilled in the contest could be contained in a single thimble, or wiped up by one handkerchief. The newspaper agreed, but Violet felt that was foolish optimism. England's own civil war had gone on for almost a decade and nearly destroyed the country. And to what end? The Roundheads eliminated the monarchy with the beheading of Charles I in 1649, and by 1660 the monarchy was back with his son Charles II. Nothing changed, but thousands of lives lost and a king beheaded. Surely the Americans would end up with a fallen leader too. Another article, which Graham had not only circled but drawn brackets around, focused on the South's hunger for recognition. During the past couple of months, the southern states had pressed Britain to recognise their burgeoning nation. The poor fools thought they had Britain in a state of helplessness because they controlled much of the world's cotton, so necessary for England's cloth mills. They didn't realise that England had been storing cotton for some time and was flush with it. What the country did need was wheat. Wheat was produced by the northern states. The crafty British politicians, though, were willing to host a Confederate delegation in London and let it press its suit for diplomatic recognition, thus not publicly rejecting the South in case it should win the war. Violet sighed as she separated the pile of papers into related stacks before removing another tray to straighten, this one full of glass-domed mourning brooches. Buyers could weave the hair of the deceased into a fanciful pattern and place it under the glass to create an everlasting keepsake to be pinned to one's breast. To think of all those American soldiers who would die ignominious deaths, heaped into mass graves without the distinction of a proper funeral and burial. How could her husband, a man whose profession was to bring dignity to death, wish for mass slaughter? She replaced the second tray. The display case looked much better now that it was tidied up inside and out. She moved over to the linen closet, its door discreetly hidden in the wallpaper at the back of the room. Inside were shelves stacked with bolts of black crepe for draping over windows, black chantilly lace for mourning shawls, and fine cambric cotton for winding sheets, except the cambric had all tumbled to the ground in a heap. How had that happened? "Graham," she called out, "did you let our cambric fall to the floor?" Only when there were no customers at Morgan Undertaking would she dare raise her voice above the gentlest of tones. "For what reason would I have done that? Maybe Will was the sloppy one going through it," he replied from the shop's reception area. Perhaps, but Will was usually as careful as Violet. Violet glanced at the mantel clock over the fireplace. Nearly 10 o'clock in the morning. Time to visit the Stanley family. She gathered up her cavernous undertaker's bag, filled with embalming fluids, tinted skin creams, cutting tools, syringes, fabric swatches, and her book of compiled drawings of coffins, mourning fashions, flowers, and memorial stones. Going to the display case, she pulled out a selection of mourning jewellery and added the pieces to her bag. Violet lifted her undertaker's hat from its stand and tied the sash under her chin. The extra-long, flowing tails of black crepe wrapped around the hat's crown were a symbol of her trade. Graham wore his own hat adorned with black crepe when meeting with customers as well. She peered into a mirror she kept next to the hat stand, pinched her cheeks to bring some colour into them, and tucked an errant strand of hair under the brim of her hat before putting on black gloves.